A very good evening to you, dear listener, and thank you so much for joining us on this edition of Spectrum Extra, live on Radio 1 FM 90. It's that moment when we reflect on the major events of the week. One of the key issues that we are going to talk about is the national budget. The speech was made yesterday. We know the national envelope is at 72.3 trillion shillings. We know government has said it's doing everything possible to move this economy forward. And it is going to hinge this budget on, growing the economy tenfold. This is the budget that lays the foundation for the next decade or 1 decade. We want, the government says by 2040, Uganda should be a 500 billion, economy. It's going to focus mainly on agro-industrialization, tourism, mineral development, science and technology. Of course, there are other things, including wealth creation, poverty alleviation. There are issues to do with infrastructure. But there is also a debate about our debt burden, although the government keeps saying that we are doing well. There are so many people who are concerned. They are also concerned about the money that is being held back from the private sector in form of the money that actually the government owes several businesses that have supplied goods and services. We are actually told it's around 5 trillion shillings, and the government is laying out a strategy to start clearing this debt. What does this mean for the private sector? Overall, we'll also be looking at what the president talked about. He talked about political corruption, but he also talked about the express penalty scheme, which has dominated very many spaces, including social media, during the course of the week. So we'll be reflecting deeper on these issues to understand where this budget is likely to take this country. Will it perform? What are some of the things that we need to address based on what happened in the past to ensure that this budget delivers? The panel. Honorable Stephen Kitale Birawa is Executive Board Member, National Planning Authority, in charge of infrastructure and fiscal planning. He did represent the people of Bulisa County in Parliament. Good evening, sir. It's a pleasure having you on Spectrum Extra.
Good evening, Radio 1 viewers and listeners, fellow panelists. It's nice that we've, in the last 2 weeks, go through the ED Adwa, the Matter Day, the State of Nation Address, and the budget. I want, on behalf of the Chairman, National Planning Authority, Professor Pamela, and the board and management, to thank Parliament, the President, and citizens for supporting us during the launch of the National Development for last week. And, of course, the budget yesterday. I pray that we as citizens, we use it as an audit to what we have been able to achieve, what we are yet to achieve, and what is required to take us.
Thank you so much for joining us. Also in studio, Dr. Xtra Rubanda, Executive Director, Uganda Manufacturers Association, UMA. He represents the voice of the private sector on this table. Good evening, sir. It's a pleasure having you here.
Good evening, Kenneth, and good evening to our listeners and viewers out there and the entire country at large.
Mr. Timothy Chimonges, he is Executive Director, Parliamentary Watch and the Center for Policy Analysis, representing the voice of civil society on this table. Good evening, sir. Pleasure having you here.
Good evening, Lukwago. Good evening to our listeners and panelists here. Good to be here. Looking forward to a very fruitful discussion. Thank you.
All right. Dr. James Tueheyo, he is member of the NRM Central Executive Committee. He represents workers there, but he's also a member of the NRM Electoral Commission, representing the voice of the politicians. Good evening, Dr. Tueheyo. I hope you will not be biased, since you are representing different shades on this table.
Good evening, Kenneth, and good evening, my colleagues here. Good evening, listeners and the possible viewers. Yes, certainly there are natural biases, but those are not encompassed in me. I'm here to present the voices, the decent voices, the genuine voices that should be listened to. But first, allow me also to congratulate the people here who have a very close linkage with Bunyoro. We enjoyed the Mpango, we call it Mpango, and where you know how they work when they're in their councils. Really, it's a very beautiful ceremony. So I congratulate you upon this successful function.
And I want to
Yes.
thank you for having
And I hope you'll carry their voice to President Yoweri Museveni to tell them that if there are any other things that they owe the kingdom, they should give
Why
them
not?
back.
He was there physically.
Mm.
He promised what he promised. He even delivered what he should have delivered. And you should be grateful. If anything, by the way, you people are around and all those listening, Bunyoro sub-region is one of the areas that have benefited most. If you go to Bunyoro now and you move in those roads, my goodness, it's another world.
Are you talking of a license?
I think so. It should be a license. I remember a very wonderful scenario when at one time my elder brother, Colonel Dr. Chizabesi, went there and said, if you want to know a Munyoro, wait for anybody coming in and look at him. If you see somebody smeared with dust, no, that one is from Munyoro, but now it's another scenario.
No, that was the colonial legacy to punish us for being anti-colonialists. So they said nothing good will go to Munyoro. So
Now everything goes.
we are just beginning.
You mean if this is the starting point,
No.
then at the end it will be another
Colonial
one.
Uganda at 63 years is just beginning to break that colonial legacy.
Maybe we should also inform Dr. Tweheyo that that's how they treat the bride.
Huh?
You know, Bunyoro is a bride because of the oil that is likely to come from there.
New airport,
So do not take the region,
great roads.
do not take the region for granted.
Uh-huh.
But that's our subject today. Let's shift our gears and look at the issues to do with the budget. And I want to begin with Dr. Xtra Muhumuza Rubanda on this particular issue. You sat down with your colleagues
For 4 hours.
for 4 hours, listened to the speech like you did in the past. Your quick comment on it.
Thank you very much, Kenneth. Quick comment. I think I will want to start by thanking my friend, the PSST. The narrative, the way the budget is being narrated, is so simple for me, you, and any other person to appreciate, and we move together. It is coming out from being a colonial document right now to a usable tool by any other person. You would even recommend him that in future he gets versions for people who cannot read English, because we are seeing something really that is communicating to general masses that would do. The first comment I would want to make on the budget comes from the chief who was giving us the budget, the president. The president comment on the absorption capacity and non-performance of funds that go to the district is something that we need to really look at. There is a challenge that when you read this budget, you would see the minister was showing us what was expected to be done, but in this report, if you treat the budget to be an annual report to the general, it lacked that component of to what extent, if we set out to do this, what has not been done, what has been done precisely in numbers. What does that now imply? That next time when we are writing this budget, two inputs are very critical. There is a unit under Office of Prime Minister we call the delivery unit. In this budget, we did not see the extent to which the other budget delivered the services it was supposed to deliver. Number two, you could see we have a unit we call Budget Monitoring and Accountability Unit in the Ministry of Finance, which tells us where are we in utilizing this budget? Where are we on the dispersing the money for this budget? For instance, if the services have not reached, where is the problem? The president highlighted and actually marked some districts that he's going to take action on them. So pose a question, where are those that are supposed to have monitored this money? There is a challenge. Then we need to know if they have performed and not performed, where is the point of discrepancy? We need to up our game on monitoring this budget. That is one thing that I picked out of it. The second thing that again came from the Fountain of Honor is he was giving pictures, and to me it was so deliberate to communicate there is a semblance that the spirit of looking at Uganda from the bigger part of the economy is dying out, especially in the hands of some of the technocrats. So, for us to, when you talk of business and you are talking of budget, we expect to have the budget speak to the ideas, to the dream that he was bringing out of the bigger market, because business is run by one of the principles called that business is in numbers. For us, we want to look at a market that has so many people. We want to look at a market that has a bigger GDP. We want to look at a market that has got alternative sources of products and services. So when the head of state brings that picture that is speaking to a unified market, he was speaking. But again, when you go into the budget, something was still lacking. There is a figure that would now amplify his dream. 88.4 of our exports as a country go to the region of East Africa. What would that imply? That we needed to see action on enablers of market access in the East Africa. For instance, the infrastructure, the bridges. I was somewhere discussing last night that connecting to Congo, which is one of our big markets, we have only 3 routes that are possible. You either go through Arua, Bundubuju, or Kisoro. But what happens if you say that every year we create one access road that enters Congo and someone uses it? Entering South Sudan, which is our second market, is we have only one entry. So some of these, what we would call infrastructure enablers, factors that enable movement of goods and services within the region, to us is a priority, but we did not see that come out very clearly in the budget.
All right, I'll be coming back to you to dig deep on some of the issues you put across, but also to tell us whether this budget actually works for the private sector, because according to our strategy, the economy, we have a private sector-led economy. You are the engine of development. I'll be coming back to you on that particular issue. Let's now turn our attention to Mr. Chemonges. Mr. Chemonges, you also monitor what happens in Parliament, and I know you followed closely what happened. Your quick remark about the budget.
So for me, first of all, is to say that if you want to know the priorities of any government, they are reflected in the budget more than what the plans and many of the alignments of what the government or the state would want to put in place. And so for me, this is a reflection. Looking at this budget, it's a pure reflection of government's priorities. My other observation is around the available resources that we have as a country out of the 72.4 trillion available for us to do the roads, to do really the discretionary budget available for government to utilize.
The development one.
The development one, which stands to around 43%. It means that the others go predominantly to address the other areas of the planning. You have statutory obligations and other things that the government is required to do. So to that end, if you have 43% of your total budget to go towards roads, private sector and all the other areas, it means that there is need for diligence to ensure that money, because it's very small, to ensure that it serves the intended purpose. What have we done previously, even before looking at this budget? For me, I would want to look at 2 things. One is, what does it look like beyond the figures that we are presented?
Okay.
Secondly, is the pre-budget conversations. I think that we've had audits, and by the Auditor General's report, highlighting some of the key shortcomings, some of the areas that we need to improve, areas that we are doing well, but also areas that we need to put more attention. If we do not address those areas, and we continue to finance, so for example, you have PDM, which has received significant amount here of close to over 1 trillion shillings.
Third year running,
and it's a rolling amounts of money. So to that end, there has been concerns that have been raised previously in terms of how this money is being utilized, and definitely there are gaps. I think that we need to focus more on bridging those gaps to ensure that we have effective utilization of the budget. Lastly, I think that one thing I am very glad of this budget is that I've heard more about revenue collection than just the expenditure, something that has been missing for some time. I've seen that, when for example, you listen to the legislators, more you are looking at spending, allocate this year, allocate that there. But where is the money coming from in terms of the mobilization of the resources locally? I think it's something for me stands out, but I think it's an area that we need to emphasize more to see that we're able to identify where to get money, first of all, so that we're able to spend. Otherwise, if you do not have money to collect, then it's a game of futility.
All right. Let's now go to Dr. James Tweheyo. Dr. James Tweheyo, you also followed closely. You followed the discussions. You followed the speech of the minister on behalf of the president. Your quick thoughts about the budget.
I was not only following, but I was physically present. The minister, on behalf of the president, made it very clear that we have to give priorities, and the priorities were put and labeled clearly. And by the way, I want to concur with my brother here. We talked about the narrative, how it was properly arranged in paragraphs, labeled paragraphs, with clear-headed headlines of whichever area that was being discussed. Infrastructure is still given attention, much as there isn't enough money. And that's the fact. They have made a mention that we are now even able to generate electricity, and even enough for exporting. But that's not enough. As long as our people haven't got yet enough electricity to use, and of course the cost of it still remains a problem. And I think this budget, much as it looked at the working of some of those areas, Bujagali and others, to put those support systems to ensure that the electricity goes low, it is still a big issue. Of course, infrastructure, good enough, they have now put the money for the standard gauge railway. And I hope we shall make a quick start. Of course, the roads, they have been running. And if you can remember, we are now putting attention not only on the new roads, but also on the repair and maintenance of the old ones. Remember, they talked about roads like Muvende, this one that goes to Muvende, and some of those other. But the president's concern at a later time, when he made a mention that, yes, equipment were sent to the districts, money, 1.3 billion, is sent to every district every year to maintain the roads, but he's surprised that some of these roads are not worked on. And he gave examples of 2 roads. When he talked of this road here, after Wakiso, that crosses over, it was a surprise. He said, I have moved in some areas, they are worked on.
Which road is that? Matuga? Is it that?
No, not Matuga. It is from Kakumiro on as you go this other side.
Oh.
It is a bad road, and it's supposed to be worked on, and money is given. And when he tried to inquire in some areas, they said, for us, we are using this road for bridges. And this money, and he said, no, this money is not meant for bridges. In some areas, money is given, it doesn't do anything much, and they claim that perhaps there are issues to do with the machinery and the rest. I went to one of the districts myself. I found money was given. And you know what had happened? The district engineer and the cow had claimed that they reserved money in materials, and when the situation stabilizes, they'll get back those materials and use them, and fuel. And the reason they gave was that if they don't hide it in that way, then the money will be swept back. A very terrible thing that should be sorted out. Yes, one of the other areas, by the way, was money has been provided for security. It may not be enough, but for the motivation and welfare of the security forces. And it was put clear, it's not only the army, it's police and other security forces. And once they are motivated properly, I think they should do the job. And at even a later time, the president made a mention of some of these security gaps that came in. And he explained, when he came to this issue of the express penalty, he put emphasis, he explained, he said, look, you people, we put this, the number plates and others, not necessarily to earn money in the short run, but to put interventions to save people, much as these people are asking for money. And it was important that he make a mention of it.
All right. Spectrum X on Radio 1 FM 90. We need to go for a break now. When we return, we'll hear from the Honorable Stephen Mukitale Virawa, who is from the National Planning Authority. National Planning Authority very critical in this budget because of the fourth National Development Plan, where most of the priorities are anchored. We'll be hearing from him, but you also keep your comments coming via the WhatsApp line 0703 090 090. Spectrum Extra continues after this break. Well, thank you so much for staying with us on Spectrum Extra live on Radio 1 FM 90, reviewing the major events of the week. We are now focusing on the national budget, and I have a panel of four: Dr. James Tweheyo, Dr. Xtra Rwanda, Mr. Chemonges Timothy, and the Honorable Stephen Mukitale Virawa. We heard from the other three. Now we want to hear from Honorable Mukitale Virawa, who comes from the National Planning Authority. Your quick thoughts, Honorable Mukitale.
First of all, National Planning Authority being part of Ministry of Finance, let me appreciate the Minister of Finance, the PSST, the Director of Budget, and all their team, including the most important, the ones in charge of resource mobilization. Because we forget when we are talking about the budget, we are quick to discuss expenditure, but we rarely talk about the source of demand. And that's why I would want to emphasize the role of private sector, which pays the taxes. I would want to emphasize the why it is noble and important that citizens pay taxes, so that we broaden the tax base, and more so at this point in time when we have a challenge of a big tax burden taking over 32% of the budget. It leaves us with a very little discretionary resource. So for me, I wouldn't even want to delve so much in discussing the other small numbers, how they are puzzled. I'm more interested in the strategic. One of the good narratives yesterday was using the fundamentals. The fundamentals in economics we are always told. So when you look at the fundamentals, the state of the economy as it is, the price stability, inflation is not there, exchange rate is stable, the current account is growing. They are all good signs. But as transformational leaders, as the president was challenging, we are more interested how this translates in the life of the citizens. And that's a fundamental, because you could have a GDP growth which does not translate. And that's why issues like local content, import substitution become very important. And the president kept teasing, challenging the young generation and those who call themselves the political class. Are you aware about East African community? Are you aware that Africa got independence, but we did not unite? Now, basically, beyond the independence and achieving the integration is the decolonization, because the colonial policy was to balkanize Africa. You are talking of Congo, my honorable colleague is talking about failure to connect with Congo. It is the whole Africa was balkanized. It was easier to connect with Paris, to connect with UK than with your neighbors. Now, over 60 years of independence, that unit, the Kwame Nkrumah Sajje from his rest in peace, and his contemporaries, the Nyereris, their intention was to break the colonial state. So the challenge the president is giving to the young is, because for him, he says for the last 60 years, he has been looking at what was their major preoccupation is the Africa they wanted, the East African they wanted, and that's why he went to Mozambique to fight. If you ask the Gen Zs of today, in terms of ideological clarity, in terms of their major preoccupation, do they have these depths of understanding in this very unclear global turbulence caused by the Trumps and others as the American empire begins to collapse? Are we about to craft the Africa we want, so that when you say you're to bring down the cost of power for the private sector in Africa, you're not only looking at Uganda, because if you generate expensive power in Uganda and the Inga tomorrow comes with cheaper, you'll not sell. So interconnection becomes very important, and we should look at multimodal transport. Because between us and Congo and our neighbors, there is Lake Victoria, there is Lake Kyoga, which are navigable. You know, in as early as 1930s, DRC and South Sudan were navigable through the Lake Albert corridor. From Masindi Port, they would connect by road to Butiawa, and they go to Toroko, they go to Kasenyi, they go to... So I think these are the big areas. And how come that we are still doing SGR, Uganda alone, Kenya alone? Why don't we have it like the old East African community, which the president is referring to, which has East African Airways, which had East African railways and harbors, which had industries. And therefore the issue of industrial policy becomes very important. If you don't understand the issue, because the president is talking about takeoff, we have taken off. Taking off, what does that mean? We are moving from the backwardness the president used to use so much in 1986, from the peasantry economy. We are now moving from pre-industrial to going. Now, what does it take? It must be deliberate and intentional to have an industrial policy with very good tax policies. You don't just do import substitution for Uganda, you say for East African. So the regional market becomes very important. If you understand that the industries you're going to locate in the region is not just, including the refinery. Don't talk about the Ugandan, the Great Lakes refinery, the East African refinery. And it was very clear to state the countries, including Somalia, including DRC, including South Sudan. Now, if you take that depth, you can be close to even saying, this debt crisis, how do we come out of it? Because how did we arrive here? That 32% of our resources is for debt servicing. But the contractors who have taken most of this debt are not even Ugandan companies. Because that's where the leakage is. That's why we are missing out on the transformation. The leakage, the big corruption is therein. That you say competitive bidding, foreign companies come and do telecoms. You kill UTL, the others are taking the profit. The local banks die, the others are taking the profit. The insurance, the same thing. You get roadworks, not Ugandan companies. You get now oil companies. So that's where the colonial state is not yet broken. So I wish the young generation could have that depth and delve into these issues. Because as you heard, when you go to these political parties, you hear the names. The twins of FDC, I don't know what, of NUPA and Impuga.
And NRM.
You can even say an NRM and the birthday boy group.
No, for us, we harmonize it.
So the question, but I'm saying in terms of this ideological clarity, the young generation is lacking. I saw one of the posting of General Saleh. He's very worried about the young generation. How they are, and he even gets worried in the army, will they think in that strategic direction? Because people are so much thinking about today. And that takes me to the president talking about questioning the political corruption. He took a lot of time to talk about the political corruption. What is the role of a political leader? It's supposed to be transformational, not transactional. Not dealers.
We will get
and
that.
He really took time on that point. Clearly meaning we could have done better if all these leaders went to their constituencies and followed up the budgets of the country, from the state. To the contrary, everybody wants to go, I have bought an ambulance. For me, I got from national budget 2 ambulances. So how can you tell him to look for? For me, I got 4 CD schools for Melissa from the budget. But somebody wants to go and take money. But the money from where? So I think it is important for the voters, and I'm saying this because this speech comes at the campaign time. Can this message go to every district, every sub-county, every constituency, the religious leaders, the civil society? Until we give our vote its value, we are not going to get transformational leaders. We are going to get transactional leaders. He has sold 2 properties to come to parliament. He has to look for them. From where? Possibly by taking some money from some vote. Possibly by being used by the would-be taxpayers. possibly by being used by those who want exemptions, possibly by being used like for us now who have the oil and gas industry. Me, I say 15,000 people should stay in 100 chain hotels, which will remain for generations. Somebody says, give me my change, you do camps and go away. And you have, the country has lost cross-generation equity.
All right.
So, really, I think the budget speech was well drafted. The message is very clear.
All right.
My concern is how can we as Ugandans out of that statement get some bit of challenged and feel that we cannot continue doing business as usual. We must do things differently, and if we are going to rationalize, we rationalize seriously. If we are failing to manage road equipment and the budget, let's do regional governments and do regional. If the Bunyoro 9 districts were given 15 billion, I am sure they would maintain jobs better in Bunyoro than giving Bulisa some Kagureda and this one without. So again, thinking small is a problem. So let us not just think of our small villages and constituencies. We need to think of regional government in Uganda. We need to think of East African community. We need to think of African market.
All right. Let's go back to Dr. Rwanda, and I want to come back to you. And now I want to focus a little bit on the key pillars in the Fourth National Development Plan and this strategy by the government to grow the economy tenfold. And one of the key aspects there is agro-based industries. You come from Uganda Manufacturers Association. First of all, you will be key players in pushing this strategy forward. As the foundation being laid, when you look at the budget, is it actually going to take off? Is this thing going to work? Because it must be followed by resources and proper planning in order to execute the budget strategy.
Thank you very much. On the pillar of agro-industrialization, very beautiful ideology. But three things need to be analyzed. One, who is doing agriculture for industrialization? We have a thinking that yes, it is very good to go mass because there is other desires of creating absorption capacity that cuts across the entire economy. But you think we needed to look at agricultural producers from three perspectives. There is a smallholder farmer who is actually being targeted by PDM, and I call that farmer my mother. But there is a commercial farmer who is supposed to be producing for industrialization. When you speak about the small ones and aggregate, they create numbers, but these numbers fall short on the parameter of predictability. But commercial farmers augment that risk and you create predictability. Predictability can best be done by commercial farmers because these ones can get loans along the way, which the small farmers may not be able to get. The small farmers have gotten a trigger of a startup capital. But there is no way, if there is drought, that a small farmer will run to a bank and get to the risk against the drought. But a commercial farmer can do that. Then there is what we would call large, extra large producers. And we are trying to say these are people with massive land. For instance, prison. Prison is one of the potential extra large producer, as they are for maize. But they are doing maize as small units of prison who produce for their own food. But if you trigger that kind of an enterprise into an extra large producer, then we will be able to tick the third box. Here I was talking commercial, small farmers. The box you tick is absorption capacity. So many people into the economic chain. But this commercial farmers, I am talking about predictability. Then the extra large combined with these other two create sustainability. It means once you say, we are going to produce maize, you are going to be sure you'll have several industries that are working on maize, and you can go and sign a contract with whichever economy to supply them that product. So we needed to augment a little bit on that one. Secondly, I was very following, very systematically following the speech. That is where we had clause 51 or paragraph 51, and the minister spoke of the industries that are following up to the PDM money, and this is where you're falling short. When you produce in large numbers at agricultural level, you need to address other two questions. The second question that you need to address is aggregation. Yes, we are putting money to the PDM, to the parish, production is increasing, but are we preparing the would-be aggregator? Are we training the aggregator? Are we getting the stores for the aggregator? Are we getting what we would call the main transport, tukutukus and small lorries that will go into the villages to aggregate these materials? Or you expect my mother to take again at 76 years a sack of 100 kilograms now to move 10 kilometers to be able to sell to the trading center? We needed to address the aggregation question. Then after that, the other thing is the first level processing units. They are up to now. Remember, we are producing for the last 2 years seasonal crops. But we have not put emphasis on primary processing units, the maize meal, the coffee, the husks, all these small units that would be able to support the chain. Then after that,
there are also issues of standards.
There are issues of standards as well, but normally in simple transitional economics, we say address a question of quantity, address the question of quality at second level. Okay. Because right now, when you go and set a unit that would establish standards, and they are getting 2 kilograms a day, then we are not doing anything. So I agree with the massive injection. Let's start and address the quality as we move. Actually, the quality and the standards will be attracted since we have challenges of financing. Then how we link these small processing units to the large producers who can now put it to the standards of global market, we are still hobbling. Now, as industrialists, the industrialists that I represent are seated at the 4th level. This is Maganjo, this is Mandera, this is Agroways. They are waiting for this material to come their way because they do not have outreach in these centers. So the two centers I have spoken about, aggregation, first level processing, are the ones that must link together and link forward this product to the national level, I would say, processor that has a license and capacity to link to the external market. So there, agro-industrialization seems not to be coming out elaborately. And lastly, we are talking about extension services. We are talking about taking advantage of these research institutes. We feel there is a lot that needs to be done on that part to be able to address some of the production constraints that are facing these people. And when you look at how much has been allocated, this year we have seen 1.8 trillion going to PDM, and the target is 100 extra parishes, 10,000 parishes. Yes, parishes, 10,078 parishes to benefit. Now, you would think that, yes, they are going to benefit. How about the industrial component? So that is where we seem to be looking at a good word, very good coining, agro-industrialization. But therein, we are concentrating on one at the expense of the other.
All right. Now, let's hear from Mr. Chemonges. Mr. Chemonges, I used that example of agro-industrialization to try and pull out the budgeting aspect vis-a-vis implementation and performance. And I want to ask you, when you look at this budget, the way it has been set out, you all agree on this table, it was well read, well arranged, figures are there, speaking to the numbers, everything seems to be thorough. Are there any things that worry you on the side of implementation and performance?
So really, Maybe just to respond to that, for me, I will refer to the question of the Auditor General's report. And again, it's the official document of government, and it highlights some of the areas that we've fallen short, but also areas that we need to improve as far as implementation is concerned. So the first, and maybe the item that has been highlighted here is on the question of PDM, for example. A well-structured program, but in terms of implementation, it falls short. I think it started from the first area of where you have 7 pillars, but there is the first pillar of the third pillar, which is the financial inclusion. More focus is there. The other, 6 pillars that have been either ignored or they have been delayed. And so what that means is that at this point in time, even when we are looking at the 1.8, the over 1 trillion shillings that has been allocated to PDM, we are seeing people, much of this going to people receiving money, and also understanding that
money had to go fast.
Money had to go fast. I don't know if it's the right direction where you shoot and then you target after, or you target first and then you shoot. There's also definitely concerns around the question of corruption, which is still it's a big wound that we have to look into. We've seen the IGG's report highlighting we lose close to 10 trillion each year. Resources that if we create gaps in how those resources are utilized, probably we could use this money in a better way, or some of these resources would go to serving the other areas. Of course, for me, I think that there's also the fundamental problem in terms of how institutions have the ability to independently execute the mandate, which again does not come out from the face value. But when you look at it deeply, you notice that institutions seem to face the challenge of always trying to identify where the mindset of the head of state looks like. Most of the institution, the ability for them to exercise the discretion that is provided for them is one thing that affects implementation. So you have IGG's office, for example, which clearly identifies their issues, for example, of corruption, maybe in most of these government institutions. In terms of the ability to go and bite, sometimes is dependent on the political correctness, and for many others we've seen, and for the institutions that have actually attempted to come very strong. Let's say the Human Rights Commission. Recently, we saw the chair coming out a bit strong in light of some of the things that are happening, and you could see the kind of response she did receive. In fact, threats maybe to her position, and so there is a gap there. I also think that there is a fundamental problem in terms of the local government and the national government. As we see today, there is a lot of centralization of resources, of decisions, and very little goes to the local government. In fact, if you look at the budget, I've not done a proper analysis of it, but as of the last one, we had less than 5% of the total budget, actually 10% of the total budget going to local government. So the rest of the 90% is held at the central government. So to that end, you see that there is, while there is desire to ensure that we decentralize services, we decentralize resources and sort of decision making, the kind of budgeting system frustrates that. And even then, actually, when you look at the resources that are sent to the local government, close to 90% of that goes to wages, salaries. Very limited of that, addresses the question of work that ideally should be done. And so that's an area that I think that as even we implement this, we may want to focus more. And lastly, I think it's on the question of accountability. We have sufficient committees, we have bodies that have already been established. You have IGG, the IGG, you have Parliament established, and with very clear frameworks.
You have units in State House also.
Units in State House. I think that the question of accountability, ensuring that some of the things highlighted either by the Auditor General or Parliament through its reports are acted on. The citizens would want to see action more than the rhetorics. Thank you.
All right. Let me come to you, Dr. James Ipeheyo, very quickly. Your take on the issue of performance vis-a-vis what we are actually seeing. Normally, it's said that as a country we have good policies, but when it comes to implementation, that's where we are caught off guard.
Now, when you want to mend broken pieces, you must first put them in the jigsaw positions before you gum them. And that's the exact situation in which we were as a country. And that is why when we talk of the growth through agro-based areas, then we must put the jigsaw together. It is not only that we are favored by nature, the soils are fair, the production can be done, it must also be linked with the other production drivers. For example, when we talk of agriculture, farming, if you grow maize, you must make sure it is dried up. You must make sure it is grinded. But you should also make sure that you have access from the garden to the production area, to the improvement area, then to the sales and marketing area. And this is where all these other drivers must come together. That is why, actually, I felt pity to those who make a budget. Because you are saying you are allocating money, for example, to the bank, East African Bank, UDB, and others. You are saying this person should go and borrow the money. Yes, this person will borrow the money and go into production. To get it done like that, he will grow the maize. He will need to put it in a silos. But in the silos which are not available in some cases, if you do massive production, I was in Kwen, one of the districts here in Uganda. They did a store. They even put the machinery. They grew maize, but they have not been able to put it in those stores. And you can see Kwen is one of the areas that grow too much and very good maize. So at the end of the day, some of these people will grow, will put in the money, whether PDM or whichever other source. They will do sufficient production. But once the storage, the cleaning, and finally the transportation to the rightful market doesn't go well, then you also have challenges. You have issues, for example, of those people who are doing chicken. Chick provides. And even in Kenya, there is this company from Kenya which gives chicks. Kenchick. You produce eggs, but you're unable to sell the eggs to the same person who gave you the chicken. So we need to put that jigsaw together.
All right.
And ensure that once we do production, then we're able to do marketing. Then we put also the other drivers to marketing, like transport. And this is where the issues come in. And when they're apportioning the money, that is where the challenge is. Because you find the money you collect cannot be enough to meet all those. So where do you put the biggest, and which of these do you consider to be the primer of these other production areas? That is why I want to make a mention, even in PDM. I'm glad yesterday they made a clear mention that now the problem that was 68% of those people who were working for the stomach, it has now reduced to 30%. And possibly with the view that it will even reduce further.
All right.
But this reduction is actually telling us that there is production. Now, is this production commensurate to the sales and marketing of what we produce, or we shall be stuck with some of what we're producing? Right. That is why the president insists on a market, external market. Where are we going to sell this, however little from each household? Where are we going to sell it? And how are we going to sell it? Will it be beneficial? We are selling it at a loss. Is it discouraging or very encouraging and stimulating production for us as a country, but for us as individuals who do the production?
All right. Spectrum X on Radio 1 FM 90. Let's go for this break. When we return, Honorable Mkitale will weigh in. We want him to explain to us how this strategy of growing the economy tenfold will actually work out, because they are the people who actually came up with it at the National Planning Authority. Stay tuned, Radio 1 FM 90. We'll continue after this break. We're glad that you're still with us on Spectrum Extra, live on Radio 1 FM 90. The panel reviewing the major events of the week. We have started by looking at the budget speech, which was delivered yesterday by Finance Minister Matia Kasaija. But with time, we'll be shifting our gears to look at the express penalty scheme, which was also a matter of concern to President Yoweri Museveni during the delivery of the speech. The panel, Honorable Stephen Mkitali-Birawa, Executive Board Member, National Planning Authority, Dr. Xtra Muhumuza, Executive Director, Uganda Manufacturers Association, Mr. Timothy Kemonges, Executive Director, Parliamentary Watch and Center for Policy Analysis, Dr. James Tweheyo, Member of the NRM Central Executive Committee. Honorable Mkitali, Fourth National Development Plan introduces this tenfold, I'll call it a theory at the moment because it has not yet been implemented. We don't know what is going to happen. How does it connect to the budget, and what are your expectations?
First of all, Kenneth and Radio 1 Spectrum viewers and listeners, the NDP4 is the force in the running of the series as we try to actualize the Vision 2040. So we are remaining with another 14 years. So to be able to, for us to continue to achieve the goal and the objective and the vision, we are not just launched the NDP4, we are starting a very big job of writing a medium-term plan, slightly more than the 5-year, because even the budget already is a 1-year plan. So we are now going to do the one ending the 2040. So that covers the NDP 5 and NDP 6. Now in that is where we are looking at things in a much more, with a much better spectrum and better horizon. Let me also say that even on PDM itself, NPA is a think tank. NPA, we want to look at things from different dimensions. At the National Planning Authority, we don't have to do business as usual. So as a think tank, we are already doing studies. The challenges you are looking at in PDM, for example, we have already asked ourselves a question. What if there is a bumper harvest from this PDM? What will you do if the eggs are too much? What will you do if there is too much poultry? What will you do when there is too much maize? We are already there. And that's why it even gives us more confidence. We know for sure if all the maize is bulked, if all the creameries are bulked, and it starts from handling. For example, you've heard of the success in the coffee export. But if you just improved handling the agronomics, the crop has boundary in the garden, and get better quality coffee, and then just roast it, the tenfold is just achievable. We lose much more. The sub-Saharan African farmer loses much more in post-harvest losses because of poor handling. Before even do value addition, just handling. If you didn't allow any tomato to rot, and it's processed into a juice, if you never allowed any mango to rot, there is a lot of wealth which is lost at that stage. And that's where, when we are discussing this, I want to hear more of private sector. Sometimes, again, as a think tank, we are discussing some of these things, and that's why I want to bring in the regional approach. God, in his creation, did not make Uganda uniform. The Bugisu Highland, the Kavale Highland, the Toro Cold area, the Unyoros, Lango. So you'll find these, and agriculture also has 15 zones. By coincidence, equal to the very regional zones. And that's why the old DFIs are in the same region. So you find the extension work, the advisory, if you looked at that model, it's actually possible to say, what are the 5 value chains Acholi can do? Is it vegetable oil? Is it some going to dairy? Now they are saying we go into coffee. And we do them big time. What is that we can do in Chigezi? What's that we can do in Imbari? Because we should not forget, the economy is not growing. We are not just looking at the 1-something trillion going to PDM. The agriculture sector is much bigger than the PDM. The PDM is targeting the people who were outside the money economy. There is already a progressive farmer. And in rural development economics, we don't just look, we have other models. For example, we know the Kalangala model, which in the last 20 years has transformed Kalangala. That's called the nucleus model. The nucleus model doesn't have to be a land grab, because that's also another problem with what we call investors. A nucleus model works with smallholders. He has outgrowers. If you want, you can also have contract farmers. Now, that kind of symbiotic relationship is very important, because you give all the 7 pillars this farmer much needed. The right inputs, and that's why sometimes we think it may be too much to say, let government do a juice factory for Teso. Yes, I'm a very good supporter of UDC, of an industrial policy, but it is wrong to start with wrong inputs. Because when you get Kinyara Sugar Works, when you get Kachira, when you get Mukwano, he knows what inputs he needs from the beginning. So the nucleus purpose is to provide the right inputs, the agro-machinery, the crop finance, the value addition, and the market. So I don't want people to start thinking that we are planning to deliver Uganda through PDM. PDM is targeting some class of people, and we are aware of the challenge.
So the question people are asking is, government actually going to invest money in these areas, or you expect the private sector?
No. We are saying,
what is government's role?
What I'm bringing here, we are not only looking at the PDM targeted the local government, and there is already some private sector there anyway. If that private sector, and using the regional approach, one would know we can do in Chigezi iris and onions big time, then the private sector should come in to add value and consolidate. And as I say, practice makes, but in economics they say it is quantity first, it is quantity consolidation which creates quality.
All right, you bring
and when you do that quantity and quality, then you meet the standards for export beyond your local market.
I think Dr. Rubanda wants to respond to you on the issue of the private sector. You're saying the private sector should actually take a lead.
At the end of, and the point I want to emphasize here, it's wrong for us to think that the government of Uganda is going to be the biggest job creator. The job creator is going to be the private. Government is an enabler. Government should be an enabler to enable this private sector grow and create more jobs. And the point he raised, which we use in rural economics, the demonstration effect. When you succeed in Kriandong, today a model farm, and you have the right inputs, your neighbors will naturally learn from you. And that's why you find more value additions, more good husbandry comes in. If you fatten your cows, your neighbor will fatten. And that's how it should be. Again, it's wrong to expect government is going to do all this. No, right. The private sector must be prepared.
Is the private sector prepared? That's the question.
I want to thank you, but again, it's good Honorable is raising the issue of the rural economy, and where the rural economy deters or differs from the national economy. National economy runs on macroeconomic parameters. Rural economy runs on the stability of the environment and right interpretation of this economy. Here is a missing link. Government at national level, they are still, he's saying, hobbling to do studies to establish which enterprises are suitable for which area. Under God's sun.
And I already gave specialization.
Fantastic. We shouldn't be talking about that. If one of the agents was working, this is the local government. I was saying, the good thing in academia, when someone has died, we continue to quote them the way their names are. When you look at Professor Apollo Nsibambi's document for decentralization, it was looking at this area called a district as a production unit, as an economy, a semi-independent economy that would have, yes, its resources, design strategies to utilize these resources, go out and collect their local revenues, start to build the infrastructure that will enable the proliferation of private sector, whose principle is very clear. We go where we put least cost and get maximum profit.
Can I add? I agree with that hypothesis, but I'm saying the district is too small. Let's lose the region, because the climatic condition of that region is similar. You get a bigger market, you get...
What is happening now, Honorable, there? For instance, when we say Bunyoro, which you understand good, it is a harmonization and synchronization of districts called Kakumiro, Chivare, Kagadi, Hoima, Masindi. These districts come together to look at the what you would call regional economic profile together. How does a road connect from Kakumiro, connect to Kagadi and all this, so that you have got a regional economy, and then this regional economy will say, how do we transit or transact with the economy across the River Nile in Acholi land? So what we are trying to say here, we need to up the game of bringing responsibility centers that lie with local governments, that lie with these districts. As we speak right now, that's why you see, for them to continue to play smart, you send money there, they use what they can, what they can't, they bring it back. Right. But we continue to face challenges as private sector in roads, in storage facilities, all these small things we think that the local economic planning should have really acted upon.
And thank you for that information, because I was at a point of bringing that. We used to, if we had what we again others call value chain, specialized value chain producer cooperatives per region, we know what is the role of progressive farmer, what is the role of those in a creamery, what's the role. Then government creates an enabler. The infrastructure roads you are talking about, electricity is affordable, the right skilling. We had district farm institutes in those days. So we have done NP has done the Karamoja plan, and we are looking at other plans to come. General Saleh, we have also worked with him. He's doing something for the Acholi community, where he's saying coffee can be done, where he's saying more vegetable oil, where he's saying we can also do animal fattening and possibly also go into other areas. Now, through that model, it is much easier, as you said, for the 9 districts of Bunyoro or the many of Acholi to have that specialization, so that that value chain is taken up to the end. The problem, somebody in Ulisa wants to produce alone, another one is in Kakumira alone. They don't have what we used to benefit from the old cooperatives. Because the old cooperatives, where you had something called the UCTU, UCCU, Cooperative Alliance, Cooperative Bank, they're all looking for 7 pillars, which was in the PMA, which we adulterated and went for NADS. NADS was only advisory and extension, it became procurement. So we lost the bigger picture.
My challenge is here. My challenge is when NPS sits in Kampala and draws the plan for Karamoja, something's grossly wrong. I would want to see.
We were in Karamoja for 9 months.
I want to see them enabled to develop their own plans.
All right, let's move on a little bit.
Every plan NPA does it with the very end user.
All right, let's move on a little bit. And we want to begin this segment by listening to a sound clip by President Yoweri Museveni as he was speaking at Kololo yesterday. Let's hear from President Yoweri Museveni that clip. Can I ask the technical person to actually play it?
The voters, you are overthrowing your own power by electing people because they have given you money. Because then you are power to elect leaders that will work with the central government to solve the problems of the voters. Do not accept petty money from politicians and throw away your power to elect a leader that can supervise the money sent to you through the parish or to fight corruption in your area. Once we solve the problem of political corruption that has paralyzed the populist politicians, it will be easy to fight the corruption of the public servants. Why? It is because we have a reliable source for Okurega. Okurega is whistleblowing. These are the people, the victims of the corruption, who are deprived of these services. The population are the victims of the corruption. Do not mix up issues. The brown envelopes I give are part of the ancient tradition here. It is the king who does that to the singers or wrestlers, etc. President is the modern king. You are not kings. You are not kings. I have a budget for that. Stop trying to be like the one who is bigger than you. Don't be. You tell those people that Museveni gives the envelope because he has got a budget. His president. I'm not president. What's happening now with the rampant fundraising, the MP carries the whole burden. It is really extortion, but it was instigated by the MPs who created the impression that they had the type of money when they did not have. Even the church leaders and other elders should ask those young mistake makers the following question. That's what I would ask my people if I saw young people throwing around money. My child, from where are you getting all this money that you are throwing around?
Well, that is the voice of President Yoweri Museveni in Kololo yesterday, talking about issues of corruption, political corruption. I want to begin with you, Dr. James Dweheyo. To whom was President Yoweri Museveni directing that message?
The president's message was directed to all of us, beginning with the MPs and all others, including even the religious leaders. Because it was very clear. You had him making a call. You religious leaders, you are the ones who are inviting people for fundraisings. You people in the communities, you are the ones who are putting them on pressure. Why don't you be the ones to curb this by asking, where do you get all this money from? Now, of course, there are others like him who would want to have their budgets increased for either giving out or for public relations, which has been a big challenge. Yes, we admit there should be some public relations, but it should be limited to a certain point. Because if you put money for other activities, if you put money for education, and education is fully provided for, then why do you have to give money for fees for other children when you have provided for it? If you have your health system working perfectly well, why do you have to raise money for people to go for treatment? Why don't you make referrals in the rightful referrals and you get things done right? If you want to be among the privileged and the first ones, then you should not be the one to promote that. And that's why, if I could divert a bit, we have put our attention on matters that we think are short-term and forgetting on the long-term matters. For example,
transactional deals.
Transactional business. When you talk of production, for example, our attention has been put on production and then marketing. It is not put on production, value addition, so that the market can bring itself. Because if you have things that are variable and marketable, people will look for them with ease than you getting the raw things from the market, from the garden, and selling them as they are. Now, if you are getting low income to that effect, why can this also help to make sure that our incomes rise by putting incentives that would help, instead of saying now, keep in the low ladder of production and we shall provide for you. If you need an ambulance, we shall bring it, don't worry. If you want a road worked on, we shall bring it. If you want a school improved, we shall come for fundraising. If you have a wedding, it is me who is there, including even funerals. So the president is spot on. He's saying, look, me as a president of the Republic of Uganda, you provide for me a budget to do this. But you're forgetting you're doing a budget for me. You are forgetting that for you, you are picking from your own pocket. And at the end of the day, he even made it clear you are forgetting to add that. At the end of the day, some of you are running away from constituencies. Some of you are hiding from the money lenders. Some of you are unable to make your own ends meet. And at the end of the day, by the way, unfortunately, some of these people leave Parliament. Some of them do not live the life they should have lived after Parliament. And that's the most unfortunate thing. So we should rethink our strategy as the community. We should rethink our strategy as members of Parliament. We should rethink our strategy as leaders to ensure that what we do is to plan and use the resources of the country for purposes for which they are meant. And lastly, he insisted, he said, you people, one of your functions is to oversee and follow up the funds that are released, not only to local governments, but also to other areas. What have you done? And he gave a caution, you people, the cows, you people, the DSOs, you people, the RDCs, you are there. Things are going like this. I'm coming for you. Because they are the people who must ensure that things are done right. But in some cases, unfortunately, they are part of the cycle that causes these shortfalls, and therefore something must be done to make things better.
All right, let's hear from you, Dr. Rubanda. You heard from the president there. He promised to talk about corruption during the State of the Nation address, and during the budget speech, he chose to talk about political corruption. What do you think could have prompted this statement from the president?
What is prompting the president, in my view, is a deep-seated problem, and what we saw or we heard yesterday is a sign of manifestation of this problem. Yesterday we were talking about budget, and in the budget principles there is what we call fiscal discipline. The word fiscal, or the term fiscal, applies two sides. You are talking about how money comes in and how money gets out. Here we need to maintain same levels, same standards of discipline. The discipline at paying of tax and the discipline at the expenditure. Now, grossly, we have been having too much concentration. You look at how many compliance notices that URA issues in a month, vis-a-vis those that are issued to those government officials that misuse government resources. How many? You will see that at the income level, there is a lot of concentration, and therefore there is some level of discipline. Because the compliance, the willingness that the citizenry have, which is our pain point as private sector, we labor to pay this much, but you see government officials taking these resources for granted, misusing them the way they would wish. That is, I heard people say, URA, there is corruption at URA, we are sorting it out. It is not only at revenue correction. There is much grossing on the side of the expenditure. Two signs. There is a sign of value for money principle. Government officials do not have that principle. I was quoting last night that why is it that up to now as a country we tolerate that it is okay to government procurement to be at this cost, yet the market value is this cost. And some people have tried to justify that, but logic does not allow it. Honestly. Secondly, how do we deal with the people whose decisions are a cost to government, are a cost to the economy, and we let them be? For instance, you are telling me we are discussing EPS next. By the time that scheme reached wherever it reached, there must be levels of decisions that have been taken. You ask a question, what happens when EPS investors take us to court? Will the decision makers that took these decisions be held accountable? Someone says no. But this investor, once he takes us to court, we shall pay and increase on our debt burden. All that is part of the fiscal discipline that I am talking about. Lastly, government shifts policy and shifts program every other day. And some of these programs go with money invested when it does not see the end result that we are targeting. For instance, it's good that Honorable Zian is representing National Planning Authority. Last NDP, we are looking at programming, and we are saying one way we are going to reduce cost is to harmonize, and we move according to programs. And if I asked right now, where did we end with this? Where have we harmonized? We're talking about 18 to 20 programs. But now we are into that, we have abandoned, we had put in money into it, now we are coming back. So what I'm trying to say here, I hear the president and his pain that some people do not respect money. They just start to dish because he's dishing. No, they ought to be disciplined and know where they can touch and where they cannot touch.
They say it's the,
but to us,
it's the big bird that teaches the young ones
the
to
young
fly.
ones. But to us, the pain is the same. Whoever dishes the money for us, we still fail, get the same pain as taxpayers.
But can I first provide
So
information?
our focus or our prayer as private sector is that please, government at all levels, sanction your physical behavior and you start to respect the little coin that this economy is producing.
All right, let's go for a break now. When we return, we'll hear from Honorable Stephen Kitale, but also hear from Mr. Chemonges before we move on to look at the EPS issue. Stay tuned, Radio 1 FM 90. We continue after this break. Thank you so much for staying with us on Spectrum Extra live on Radio 1 FM 90. Reviewing the major events of the week. We are looking at the budget speech and matters incidental to following the statements made by President Yoweri Museveni at this particular event, which was held yesterday at Kololo Independence Ground. We have a number of comments coming in. I'll read out some of them. Kenneth, thank you very much for the show. I'm Peter Mambuga Mugiria, listening to you from Mbale, getting you loud and clear.
Wow.
My question is, when I listen to all guests, each one of them is right and articulate. All of them are on point. The same is reflected in the government circles. Officials are very verbally articulate, but has life changed or improved on the ground after so many decades of budgets and State of Nation address? Answer is staggered. However, it is mainly a no. Then where does the problem lie? If you rush to pinpoint at poor implementation or the lack of it, why has that area remained grey and unresolved? Why has it remained a source of headache? And if it is correctly diagnosed, why don't we see it hard tackling? Every speaker in Uganda is so articulate and very knowledgeable with articulate English, but on the ground conditions remain bad. You find government telling private sector this is good, this should be done like this. There is a big market here and there. Why doesn't the government do it itself after so many decades of dictating and talking down private sector players? Instead of reverting to public sector-led economic development, we are there singing empty IMF and World Bank prescribed non-starter theories of private sector-led economy and subdued growth without development. Economically, Ugandan players aren't ideologically aligned. That's a comment that comes in from Mujiria there. We have another comment here that says, that's from Moffat. He says, thank you for hosting those panelists. The topic of my interest is 30 speed limit on our Kampala roads. This was a highly effective policy that achieved 100% result for which it was introduced. Nearly no accidents reported and 100% road discipline observed. I therefore strongly disagree with the President's intervention and urge the full implementation and urgent enforcement of that rule. I am a border rider and I want that rule enforced. Another comment, Henry in Banda. Thanks for the program. It is amusing to hear the President lament about ideological bankruptcy in a society he has led for 40 years. This bankruptcy is a sign of poor leadership and governance. Tokenism, institutional corruption, transactional politics, patronage, etc. were created and nurtured under the regime, and they have gone a long way in destroying the backbone of this society. We need thorough introspection, and the President should reform his leadership instead of lamenting and bashing the population. But I guess he has exhausted his time. His government trying to reinvent cooperatives after having dismantled them because they were too UPC. After 40 years in power, fidgeting now, government wakes up. No wonder Africans cannot govern themselves. More comments coming in. We'll be sampling more as we continue with the discussion. Let's hear from you, Honorable Mkitale, on the sound clip of President Yoweri Museveni talking about political corruption. Please keep it short.
First of all, before I came to Parliament, as a practitioner in private sector, as a tax collector, person in import and export, and looking at a lot of procurements in this country, I know that political leaders are not in politics for employment. That is the idea. And ideally, they should not be remunerated. Political leaders should be volunteers, transformational, servant leaders, and can only be facilitated. And that's why some of us wanted government vehicles with a drive. When you're not doing government work, you park it. Even if they mean parking it in the evening, it's okay. In some jurisdictions, they even have chambers where to stay. When the house is on, you go in the government flat. When you are not in it, you go back. So, the moment it became a job, remuneration, I don't know emolument, it went wrong. I disagreed with it before I was an MP. Even when I was an MP, I disagree. And that's why some of us who have been in the Presidential Advisory Committee of Budget, we have been talking about bringing down the public administration costs so that this money goes to private sector. We have been talking about mergers, rationalization, and restructuring. We have been talking about regional governments because these are too many. At the time Article 178 of the Constitution was introduced in 2005, we had only 80 districts. And we would be at 80. And, we would all be remaining in that regional government. And all these deficiencies we are finding is because we have created very many districts and everybody plans for his small village. And yet we say economies of scale. You need a Banyankore Kweterana, you need a Bunyoro grower, you need a... And that is common sense. Why does everybody still meet the president in the caucus? But they don't have a structure. We're just in the Bunyoro, and they're asking Bunyoro MPs. The Katikiro cannot call you because you're not accountable. But in a regional tier government, which is very well sought, you sit in one region. As Banyachigezi, West Nile has with the caucus. No power, no power. For 15 years. Said, why don't you support operate? It is in the constitution. Operationalize it. But it also brings regional balance. Bunyoro has been complaining for university for... Bunyoro is the founder of Makere. Makere at 100, Bunyoro has no university. The answer is there. But the other information is that we are running a program approach. We left... it's actual outcome. So the 20 programs, as you've rightly put, includes private sector, which was not there before.
Are you still
we are talking of human capital development. No, I'm giving information because you are saying we had set the program approach. No, even NDP4 is clearly being implemented into the program approach. Yes, and you can see the PIAPs, the project implementation action plans are a structure. So you will find possibly land saying we don't want to be in the environment. You will find Attorney General, Minister of Justice, why are we with the Attorney General? But we are saying you all work together to deliver for a country. So, and I think the program approach, yes, it is new. We must continue to work within the program approach.
Unfortunately,
and that's how we are going to.
We're running out of time, Honorable Mkitale, but I want to stay with you and move on to this issue of the express penalty scheme. You closely followed what was happening, and now it has been stopped. This listener who sent in a message actually seems to suggest that the enforcement should go on very quickly in a few seconds, so that we bring on.
As I said, it is important when you bring the cost of administration, you raise more taxes, so that you reduce debt. That would be the ideal. But sometimes we miss it. And this express penalty of traffic, I want to relate it with IOV. It is very important for every country to have inspector vehicles. But the moment it becomes a deal of somebody, because IOV, when I was doing it as for the many years I was in charge of imports of vehicles, we were doing it as a government function at Naguru there. But when it came, it was now private, very expensive. Now, as the president rightly said, the fundamental reason why we introduced this digitalized number plates was security. However, in other jurisdictions, it is also a very good tool for raising revenue, charging penalties. But now, again, all of a sudden, I am told the company is non-existent. It was cancelled by Uganda Institution Services Bureau. So how does it get even that tender when it doesn't exist in the first place? So again, it's the issue of some mafias, the issues of some deep state trying to kill. And moreover, we are going for an election time. So for me, I want to agree with the president. Things to do, you see, when you do an industrial policy, it follows with the tax. Tax is not only for raising revenue. Tax may be to discourage imports, tax so that it can encourage the private sector to produce. Tax can be to stop dumping in the country. But to think tax is only for raising revenue is unfortunate, more so when we are in this global world. And I think, let us think right. The point I'm making is that it's noble to pay taxes. It's noble for all of us. If we are going to say we don't want debts, we don't want these homosexuals to give us money, then we should be able to defend our own economy. But when this money is paid, let's account. And that's why I want some Commissioner General URA. Really, he's doing his part in terms of his education. But we who are spending the political side, we are not doing enough to explain to citizens why it takes so long for some of the roads in the greater Kampala which pays taxes, which were Tamaka yesterday to become Marab. And no wonder the president yesterday said, and the minister who was delegated, that the whole Kampala is a construction site. Let us do maintenance. People are willing to pay taxes as long as they are getting services. I think that's what we have to do as government. Let's do accountability when we collect taxes.
All right, let's hear from you, Dr. James Tuaheyo, on this issue of the express penalty scheme. What's your take? There's been an uproar. And
there is an uproar. Me, I am looking at it from a different perspective altogether. It is very true that the punishment is very harsh. It is very true. But it's a punishment for what? For a crime that you commit. And we are always crying. But by the way, you should look at people when they're driving on the road, what they are complaining about. Even alone in the car, you hear somebody go, this bodabodas, this rough taxis, this. Yes. Much as the punishment is harsh, much as the company they are talking about may be non-existent or existent, let us look at the reality of the matter. Our drivers, including ourselves who are in here, do wrong things knowingly or unknowingly. And therefore, it is good for the state, it is good for the country to ensure that anybody who does a crime pays for it. It is always important to make it difficult, if not impossible, for anybody to commit a crime knowingly and proceed and do it. And that's where the problem is. The problem is not the money that we pay. The problem is our people are saying, put the punishment so small that when I do a mistake, I just walk away and get it done. I have no problem with that. It's like these children in schools who would make noise in class or who would commit all sins knowing that he's wearing 5 pants, and even if you beat him, it won't make a point.
We can't doubt you. You were a teacher.
It make a point. So my view is, yes, let us first look at the intent and purpose of this. Was it to generate money? If it was generating money, of course, government was not a big beneficiary, because actually this money was going to a private sector, to a private person, who, according to my brother here, is non-existent. So, if this money was going to government, still would say no. This is not the right way for government to raise funds. But we are saying yes, the punishment should be harsh, should be strong to deter the actions.
Prohibitive.
Yes, it should be prohibitive. And much as me, I don't agree with the president to the extent. He's my chief. Yes. He's saying, don't punish these people heavily. He's a parent always. And by the way, that's the crime for which he has been accused always. You know,
some people are saying it's a collection. It's an election year, and the president chose to flow with the wave.
Many other presidents are harsh, and they are paid very, very well. They are actually given the votes for being hard. Sometimes our president has been punished for being soft, especially when it comes to corruption. You have always seen, the president does not, Now, when action is taken, the president says, stop. Sometimes he actually pays more. What do you mean? When you get an accident on the express highway, what happens? Some people will say, it is negligible, you have lost one person. No. If that one person was your parent, or was your child or daughter, and is lost because you are driving in a place that requires 60 kilometers per hour for you are driving 130, then this should be prohibitive. Me as a teacher, me as a parent, I would say yes, these punishments should be there.
All right.
I could be actually one of those who would pay the price. But if it was there and everybody knows it, if anybody knew that you should not throw, for example, a bottle through the window of a car when running, if anybody knew that where there is a speed limit, you should limit it, then our discipline, our survival, our use of the road, by everybody, including a border, would be good. If everybody knew that when the lights are off, when they are red, you should stop. Do you know what happens just across here to our neighborhood, where there is a zebra crossing?
All right. Let's hear
you
from
see
you.
people being knocked off.
All right.
So let the punishment be there. However harsh, it would be prohibitive, it would save the people of this country, and it would instill discipline in us to the extent that at a time you'd find us appreciating.
All right, Mr. Chemonges, your quick thoughts on this issue of the express penalty scheme.
Thank you, Anderson. On a daily, we lose at least 14 people as a result of road crashes, and we cumulatively lose close to 5% of our GDP as a result of these road crashes. In the 2023 report by the police report, I'm seeing that close to 35% of the road crashes were attributed to speed. So it's a fundamental problem. And coming from that end, I think that if there are any efforts to address that, it should be welcomed. Are there concerns in terms of maybe the multiply effect of the concerns coming from the stakeholders? Definitely yes. Should you be able to provide mechanisms for listening to them? Yes, but I think that the law is appropriate. There is a lot of misinformation. There is a lot of propaganda arising from most of this. And for me, I think that we should have allowed for this law to take longer for it to be tested. If there are concerns, they could be addressed. But ultimately, looking at what we lose as a country, both in terms of resources, in terms of the lives that are lost, it's significant. This law is long overdue. Looking at our infrastructure, looking at the issues to do with the implementation that we are facing today in our roads, this law is long overdue. But I think that with the concerns that stakeholders, the taxi drivers and all the other players raising, I think they should be listened to. But predominantly, I think that if you look at the problem and look at the mechanism being put in place, you see that it's commiserate. I think that there's just been a bit of either more awareness to the issue, but also maybe as a clarity in terms of the 30 kilometer per hour, it focuses on specific areas. It's not general. There are other areas that location by location. What maybe would require more from the Ministry of Works is to provide those demarcations of signages for more clarity to ensure and more sensitization, which can be done. But in terms of the law, in terms of the implementation, I think it's long overdue.
All right, let's hear from you, Dr. Ruvanda. Dr. Ruvanda, what's your take on this EPRC issue? It has just started and
the EPRC, Kenneth, is sign again, as I said, is a sign of something that we don't want to appreciate. The infrastructure in this country has got structural problems which emanate from how we plan our roads. You cannot say that I wake up and I am driving at 30 throughout the day and I'm in a taxi and you expect me to come and make money. That is not practically possible. It has got a public administration challenge. Whose job was it supposed to be for us to reach here, as it is commonly put in town? How did we get here?
How did the rain start beating?
Yes. Where were we? We had a system collapse in public administration, especially on how we use our roads. Pose the question, how come they are still in the city roads with potholes? Who justifies that and who explains that and who punishes that? If the public administration function was on set, then there is idealization issue. Idealization because someone has seen it apply in Germany. He wants to come and bring it here as a scheme and say it is nice. Please, not every beautiful woman should be in your house. There has to be a limit. In this case, they us as Uganda, given our up two problems I was spoken about, we are poorly planned, we are poorly managing our structures. There are those we can take and those we cannot take. It brings me to a third issue. The procurement, the intent of this scheme. Who has an advert where this function was advertised? It was
single sourced.
Single sourced. What is procurement PPDLO saying?
It is permissible.
It is okay. for certain people.
If it is a
But what
security
would make
procurement.
it wrong if it is advertised, so that we know that this company qualified? What would have been wrong? Now, my last question is, who is going to be punished? Since now we are running a punitive state, who is going to be punished for this error? No one is going to be punished, but the intent was to punish a road user who has never given enough roads and he's struggling really to bypass and make ends meet, and then that one must be punished, but this one who has erred should not be punished. So what I'm trying to say here, let's not continue to bury our heads and wait for when the spirits come up, and then that's when we react. The truth of the matter is we need to address the question logically, and we desist from this whole thing every day. We are discussing punishment. I have asked a question again and again. What happens when I make an accident at a spot where there is no sign? How many times has government compensated? When the sign is not there, it is okay, and someone will come and say, we are very sorry, you see, this should have been like this. But in actual sense, so what I'm trying to say, let's use logic and desist from this word of punishment as if the private sector, the citizenry out there, have got pots of money where they keep pulling money to pay for punishments. You go to URA every time, you dodged this tax punishment. You dodged. I'm very happy, by the way, that the president has eventually, we visited him when we had an outcry on IFRI's punishment. He understood us. No one else had listened to us as private sector. And he came yesterday in the budget, and they articulated that when you don't pay in time your IFRI's obligation, your VAT obligation, you will pay double. Very clear now.
Punitive.
Yes, but before they were saying 6 million. Whether you have defaulted, it was. And was that person punished? Who proposed that? So let's try to be clear.
Against compliance.
All right.
Yes.
Time is not on our side.
I only wanted to say
very
that
quickly.
as a country, we should strive to have well-intended programs, well-executed, well-thought. It's because when, the negation, when such a good intention is badly implemented, you take us backward. And there have been so many other good intentions. You want to zone borders, instead of Jennifer Msi speaking, it is somebody of border 10 ordered to speak and shutting up Jennifer Msi. I have talked the issue of inspection of vehicles is very important, because part of the problem also we have a lot of DMCs. The issue of order in our camp, of course some of our districts are very small and it's upcoming, but in the greater Kampala, the indiscipline is too much. Something has to be done about some order. Of course, we talked about the infrastructure deficit. How I wish, when we have such program, it is well sought, it is well publicized, it is sensitized, and even the procurement. Because you may find even the first complainant are those who missed out on the business. The ones who made an alarm and say, oh, some thief is taking this contract. So,
right.
And that's why they will say, hey, regarding. So, for me, I think, let us have a discipline of having a good Kampala, a good city,
Uganda.
a good Uganda. Because we cannot turn out from international standards. We want to become a destination, and I think the president, he had a role as a leader to bring some sanity.
We have to bring this discussion to an end. I must thank you, dear panelists, for making time to be here to discuss these key issues in our country. Thank you, dear listeners, for tuning in and contributing to this discussion. Now, for me and the gentlemen here in the studio, we wish you a fabulous weekend.